Hey, I'm Daniel, and you're watching the Filmcraziest Show. On this episode, I was joined by director and producer Lisa Immordino Vreeland for her documentary Truman and Tennessee, an intimate conversation. The film is an innovative dual portrait documentary about the work, lives, and personal journeys of Truman Capote and Tennessee Williams. The film is told through archive footage and Truman and Tennessee's words, as the voiceover work is done for the film by Jim Parsons as Capote and Zachary Quinto as Tennessee Williams. The film opened in select theaters on June 18th, and options to watch will be below. Let's get right into the conversation, and here's Lisa to introduce us.
Hi, this is Lisa Immordino Vreeland, and I'm the director and producer of Truman Capote and Tennessee Williams, an intimate conversation. And we're watching the film's Craziest Show.
Cool. Thanks, Lisa. And I'm Daniel, the host of the Filmcraziest Show. It's great to be chatting with you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
We've already have the New York sirens in the background. We're off to a good start.
Yes, it may come down our street, so you may hear more.
Okay, I love it. It's the ambiance that's important, you know. I think I always start my documentaries just by asking, like, what drew you to telling the story about Truman Capote and Tennessee Williams?
You know, really what was important for me was to show their talent as writers. I mean, that's really what I wanted to be able to highlight and to be able to really show again to the world, because I think that we don't often think enough about their words. And I really wanted their words to help tell their story. And I think that they've become such characters of themselves that we actually have forgotten what their words and what their talent was about. It was a very precise idea in my head to use their written words to be able to create the whole narrative arc of the film.
So everything that Jim Parsons and Zachary Quinto say, are those from the Capote and Tennessee Williams's journals, or is that?
It's from, it could be from, it's everything that they've said. There's nothing really. I mean, I think we maybe scripted a couple of words occasionally just for transitions, but no, those are all things that they either wrote that we found in archives and journals and letters, in books, but it's all their own words. And it was really important to be able to do that. And it was so nice to be able to have such a breadth of material, because we had a lot of material to work with. And that's kind of the process of research that I love to do, is to sit down and go through all of this material.
Okay. What was the coolest thing that you found in the research?
I think that I have to say there, on different levels, there were things, because I discovered really more than anything, I really did not know enough about Tennessee Williams personally. And I would say that I really discovered what a true person he was, how honest he was with his feelings. And that's something that is so important to me. And that, he, from a very young age, he had a journal, he would write in it, and it was important to really talk about his own true feelings. And ultimately, that was all of his inner self that he poured out in his plays, and that we've enjoyed for decades. But I didn't know that much about him personally, and I loved hearing that. And with Truman, I knew him so much more, and I knew his history so much more, and I didn't discover anything necessarily new about him, but I loved the way that they had this friendship and this kind of relationship with each other, that they would just touch base, and it was a friendship, but it was also, they were frenemies at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, I was definitely going to ask if they would be like modern day frenemies, just because of the depiction in Answered Prayers, especially.
Definitely. And plus, there is always competition. And, we have to remember that Truman won a literary prize for, I believe it was Miriam, and he did very early on in his life. And then he never won anything else. And, let's not forget that. Tennessee Williams, he won 2 Pulitzer Prize and other major literary prizes. And of course, I would say that Truman was the more competitive of the two, but of course Tennessee was as well. But you can't help but have that as part of their relationship.
Okay, but I think it was Tennessee who said that, like, he gets jealous of like other up and coming writers. That I forget what he says exactly, but did you want to speak to that?
Well, he does talk about the fact that if somebody else had a play on Broadway, a book or something else that had been a play on, and was down the street from his own theater, he was very, very jealous,
Right.
and of course he was, But I think that's just the nature of that of creativity. I think, especially um, when in the end the literary work is being shown either in books or in plays or on screen. This is and let's remember that the world was also so much smaller back then. Now we have thousands and thousands of filmmakers and writers, and back then it was just all kind of much smaller.
Okay. Yeah. So they were much more in the limelight of it, right?
Very much so.
Okay. I also thought it was very interesting, just like hearing Capote saying that, oh, like if I see someone eyeing an antique cup, like I'm gonna go back and buy it. And that's a funny but horrible way to live. What did you think about that?
No, it was tough. It was tough because I did not. Truman Capote has lingered in kind of all of my films in some way because he was friends with Deanna Vreeland, and he knew Peggy Guggenheim, and he was very good friends with Cecil B. And he was, and then of course he skewered all of his friends and answered prayers, and I have to say, and I didn't like that aspect of his character, and he obviously was not a very happy human being, and but it's also difficult when you know that he came from a childhood where he wasn't loved, he was locked in rooms by his mother, so there are a lot of things that happened in his life as a young child, and he wasn't shown love. So how do you, if you're not shown love, how do you give love? And he didn't love himself, and it came out so clearly in so many different ways. And I had a tough time with this character personally. I really did, and I felt kind of hard for Tennessee Williams because I really like people who are open and honest about their feelings. And there's a veneer just of insincerity that surrounds Truman.
Okay.
I personally find hard to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally see that. And like, I mean, yeah, like on the opposite side, like Tennessee, I loved his charm, and especially in one of those interviews, especially when like I just love the way he talks. And especially when he says, "Oh, we're getting a bit personal. I'd love to go somewhere else." I just thought that was so funny.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Now, it's also interesting for me, like watching this film, because I don't know much about Capote other than he was played by Philip Seymour Hoffman in the biography, and I've read his a novel In Cold Blood, and then all I really knew about Tennessee Williams was that Tommy Wiseau just loves him in the room, but like I'm kind of a newcomer, so but I found it very accessible. So was there?
Good. That's exactly because you're the generation. Because when I make these films, I'm first of all, I'm not an expert on any of these characters whose films who I make films on, and I'm really very much of a student when I approach all of these films, and I try to. But I'm thinking about the fact that I love to educate a younger generation, which is good. But then also, I would love to have a generation which is mine or older who are very familiar with them, but that they also have a takeaway. And so it's important to hear that, if you're not that familiar, that you actually had a takeaway and you found it approachable. And then that means that we succeeded on somewhere, which is very good. And because, we weren't trying to give you this wasn't a biopic of their lives, what they've done, what they've achieved. This was really a moment in time. And a moment in time where their words were really making the film come alive. We were using their words to tell their story, but we also wanted to show the intimacy of what this life was about back then. And so it was very clear in our mind how we wanted to sound and how we wanted visually to look, and because we wanted to kind of have that feeling of the 50s and 60s, that kind of like sexiness at the time, of New York feeling like that, because New York was just so beautiful in that moment, and so we hope that it came across that way.
Okay, I think it did. Can you talk more about the visuals, and also just the music is as important as the voices in this film?
Oh, yes, definitely. So I do like to work with archives, and I like to it's always such a joy to me when I find some visual material, if it's in photographs or footage that I've discovered. And like the hunt for any documentary filmmaker, the hunt for any of this material is one of the most exciting things. And when you find it, you're like, I finally found it.
Cool.
And I did come across these really beautiful photographs by the photographer David Atty, and who studied with Brodovich, an important art director. And we used 28 of them in the film, and they're really very, very strong visually, and they're all kind of distorted. They show distorted New York in the 50s. They also have a Warholian kind of feeling. We use them during the whole time we're speaking about addiction, and we wanted visually to be very dreamy and to be kind of this dreamscape, and the words kind of helped create this whole visual, and we really wanted to shoot. We shot mostly with a Bolex, and we wanted to have these layers that just so you're kind of sitting there, you're looking, you're listening to the words, and you listen to the great words that's also come to life with Jim Parsons and Zach Quinto, thankfully playing Truman Capote and Tennessee Williams. But we were very kind of clear on the visual statement that we wanted to make with the film. And I worked with this wonderful composer by the name of Michele D'Amato. As a composer, he's known as Madi, and he's based in Brindisi in Italy. And we were super, super closely on this. And he's a real student of classical music, but he is somebody I work with often, and he just really wants to get behind the real purpose of the film and get underneath, understand both of these characters. And I think he did a great job. I mean, I love the music, and so he composed the whole thing.
Okay, awesome. Now I'd love to talk about this is almost kind of like performance art with Quinto and Parsons voicing. Yes. So can you talk about casting them for these two legends?
Yes. Well, it was my dream to be able to get them, and we got them, which is just such a nice, ultimately I think it's because first of all, Zach is really, Tennessee Williams is an important figure in his own creative life. And I think that was one of the main reasons. And he helped get Jim. And, I really wanted it was really right. And it was the thing to do to be able to get two gay actors to be able to play the roles. And it's important to note that both Truman and Tennessee, they were openly gay during a time that it just wasn't talked about, and they didn't really shy away from it. And I think that what was so nice about Jim and Zach acting in this is the fact that they really brought them to life. I mean, there was no direction on my part to say, to play them exactly as they sounded, but it was really about bringing the emotions of who they were through their words, just because what they said were really their own words. And I was able to work with them in person, which is really nice. And they really brought it to life, and it was a very collaborative situation. And they were both they worked really hard to do it, and they've been wonderful. I feel so lucky to have had them be part of it. And it's kind of the fact that it was during the pandemic certainly helped us because they had more free time. But it's been such an introspective time for so many people, and I think that this was also a good moment for them to be able to kind of take a step back from their life of just running around and being on from one project on the next, and this is just a little bit of a different beat for them.
Okay, and I know they had worked on The Boys in the Band together, and that was kind of a heavy film. So was this kind of like a, I guess, not lighthearted, but was that kind of like a breather from that heaviness and just to take this on?
I think that, I can't speak for them at all, but I think that it was pretty, the whole dealing with the addiction and things, it was pretty heavy dealing with that in our film because we didn't shy away from it. But I think it was a different approach, and I know that they like to work together. That's what was really nice about it. And I did work with them I was in LA with Zach, and I was in New York with Jim. Okay. But I think they loved the idea of doing something together, which was really nice. And so, we were very, very lucky. I'm really honored that they accepted to do it. And they've just been incredibly supportive. So I couldn't say anything better about them.
was definitely going to ask if they recorded together, but that question's out the window. What
That's
were
a COVID and not at the time that really was not acceptable to do. So,
fair? What were the recording sessions like?
they were fun. I mean, because you have to have fun also doing this, and they were. It's clear when you're doing this because now I've done this a couple of times, and it's really clear on both the actor's part and my part when the beat is correct. Like you know that you have the sentiment that you want, and it's really they had the words obviously before they could look into they could work on them, but it's also better almost to come into a session like this fresh and it was just a really really nice experience. I mean, because they both really worked hard on getting the tone that they wanted, the sentiment that they wanted, and they were hard on themselves because they really wanted it correct, and they said no wait, I'm going to do this again. And so it was very important to them. I was thrilled with them.
Okay. And last one about them, but I know you said that they didn't have to get the voices exactly right, but can you talk to them, talk about like them workshopping the voices?
Well, I didn't actually. I just spoke with them on the phone, or we had, I don't know, probably we had a Zoom meeting or two, and
Okay.
about it. But it was with. I think Truman's voice is the trickiest, without a doubt, because so many people have made caricatures of it, and you didn't want to go down that path. You really didn't. And the device of trying to do it perfectly I didn't think was right. And so I know that the two of them spoke to each other without me on the phone, just to kind of figure out what they were doing amongst themselves. But it was very clear when we tried it a couple of times, and then we just went for it. And you can always tell if it dips out for a second, and we just continue to work on it. But it was really, I don't think I drove them crazy at all. I hope they make to say something different, but no, it's a really nice relationship to be able to have this kind of interaction with them, and I really felt that they were very much inspired by the words, which is really it's important.
Was it intentional for this to be released during Pride Month?
No, well, I don't know. That is Kino Lorber who decides to distribute it, but I think it's very good timing.
Okay.
Because these are two gay men who are openly about it, and in a time that people really weren't as open.
Okay, fair enough. And my last one is kind of a fun one, but also I just really like this quote that Capote says at one point, home is where you hang your hat. Is that especially true for filmmakers?
Home is where you hang your hat. That's an interesting thought. And I think the home, in my case, is always inside of me, being very clear and sure about what my thoughts are. But I do think that there's an aspect of this being malleable and kind of going with the flow, because what I've noticed about filmmaking, and I've been doing this for 10 years, which is still it's a good amount, but I'm certainly not an expert at it. But I have realized that you have to be very kind of clear in. I'm thinking of home as being kind of my inner beacon, and that I have to be kind of clear about my thoughts and be precise about them. And so I try to be, but I'm also learning. Every film that I have, the home can kind of like maybe be unstable a little bit, because I'm going into new grounds. For this, in fact, with this film, I think I decided I definitely did not want talking heads. Have two of these like most important literary greats of the 20th century together in a film without a talking head being a testimony to them and to their greatness. But having the fortune of having two great actors represent them. So I think it's always kind of changing what home is, and I know for me, I need to kind of push the envelope a little bit more every time to be challenged, and but I always have takeaways of like, oh, I could have done this or I could have done that. And it's not necessarily just about, it's like little things that I have to continue learning about to make it make sense for me. So I don't know. I hope I answered your question, but
I think so. Awesome. Cool. So Lisa, sorry, how do you say your middle name?
that's a tough one. Immordino Vreeland.
Okay. So Lisa Immordino Vreeland, who is the director and producer of Truman and Tennessee, an intimate conversation. Thank you for chatting with me on the Filmcraziest Show.
Thank you. Thanks.